Welcome to Kinky Office Hours once again. Boop, boop, boop. This is a very DIY operation, if you can't tell. So welcome. My name is Emily Letts. I'm a therapeutic kink practitioner. Let me put this over here. Based in Boulder, Colorado. I'm here with my partner, Jeff Baldwin. And we are here to answer questions. We are here to talk a little bit about our work, anything that comes up, really. It's sort of office hours. This is time for, yeah, hello, Brian. Brian is our super fan. This is the time for folks to get the support they need, basically. Let's see. 1 second. We're just gonna wait a tiny bit for folks to come in. Okay. So, welcome. So we just spent a I'll put this down here maybe. We just spent a 2.5 weeks in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to revisit the theater community there, which is where I began my career right out of college as an actress, and to see some fringe shows. So now we have just literally a couple hours ago landed back in Boulder, Colorado, where we are unpacking and just getting our lives back in order. So, welcome to Kinky Office Hours. So I wanted to also note that my new podcast has come out, which is called Soul Kink Therapy. And on Soul Kink Therapy, the first episode just came out on Friday of last week, so it's a couple days old. But I interview a new kinky guest every week to explore their fetishes, kinks, desires, and patterns, to start a sort of understanding what's going on and how to support their path to liberation. I'm really proud of it. The first episode, I interviewed a literotica writer based in the UK named Jenny Raven, about what it's like to be a crossdresser with sort of two lives. They're in their 50s and have a child and are been long-term partnered, and so and their partner does know about it, but it's just a really beautiful exploration of the dance between femininity and the feminine and masculine in one body, in a male body, and how that shows up and navigating that, and also sort of what, like, on the gender spectrum, what all of that means and how it gets politicized. And it's really beautiful, nuanced conversation. And I also work with Jenny to go sort of support her in finding her feminine in a more embodied way. So you can go check that out on Spotify at Soul Kink, and just look up Soul Kink Therapy and you'll see a picture of my face up there. Great. So, for folks in the room, please put questions, any things that you'd like us to talk about, in the chat section. We'd love to engage with you, since that's the whole purpose of this. Yeah. What would you like us to talk about today? We have years of experience exploring therapeutic kink as a healing modality in our own lives, and also we live in a community. One of the things that's really beautiful about Boulder, Colorado, is that we live in a community where we are surrounded by coaches. We are surrounded by conscious people who also practice conscious kink in their relationships, which is a very special thing. And so when we go into scenes, or when we want to talk about scenes, like, everyone in our all of our dearest friends are just like right there with us. They know exactly what we're talking about. They know they they really support us in many different ways and inspire us. So Brian S says, "Great conversation with Jenny. Anything you wish you spoke about with them but ran out of time." Oh, thanks, Brian. Thank you for taking a listen to that episode. Anything I wish I spoke about with Jenny at the time. It's really interesting because I, I work with a lot of different people. And so I am very used to the way that people either absorb the coaching that I'm giving them, or there's blockages to not absorbing it. And so one thing what's really interesting with Jenny is that, Jenny found me on the internet, and they're a literotica writer. And so um, she she didn't necessarily come to me looking for, like, deep healing and coaching, which is a very different experience than when people do come to me with, like, "I'm ready to go, like, let's change some shit," like, it's a very different experience, and so, when I was working with Jenny, a lot of the times when we would make sort of a big, breakthrough, or when there would be, like, sort of like this deep insight. Um, she's also British. It was really interesting to sort of watch her just be like, "Mhm, I will receive that, thank you. Mhm, yes, that's correct." Whereas more Americans, like, really are a little bit more embodied, um, and so it was hard it was hard to see if the molding was happening, in the way that like, the responses were different. So, probably, I mean, if, like, I wish maybe we could have had a little bit more time to work with Jenny's body and with her voice, because what we discovered is that her voice was really, when she's in her cross-dressing female persona, her voice, she doesn't use her voice. And that w or she's very embodied and there's no voice, but when she moves into talking, she moves into her masculine, and it becomes all head and she loses her body. Um, and actually, that might be something I'd love to hear Jeff talk about, sort of like what it means to live a life. Most men that come to me to work with me who, are very disembodied, which means, like, their head is really not connected to their body. And so a lot of the work that we have to do, and which is what kink is so amazing for, is training folks to put actually bring them into their body so that they can feel more sensitive about it. And most men have never had that impulse or curiosity. And so once they're embodied, then, like pleasure, sort of, it can explode because if they can't feel pleasure if they can't feel their bodies. So Jeff actually went through this experience. I was sort of Jeff's initial first coach that he's ever had. Again, I met him when he was like 53, 54, 54. And he was extremely disembodied, like extremely. And so I'm gonna hand it over to I would love to hear a little bit about to Jeff about what was it like, the process of spending most of your life disembodied, and then the process of starting to become embodied. And before you do that, Brian S says, "I wonder if she got into a dance class, Zumba, striptease, stripper size tango with her partner, if her omega or alpha energy would come out more." Yeah, I mean, dance is a really powerful dance, singing, all of these embodied expression, but dance is a very powerful tool to move people into their bodies. It's interesting. My dad is a retired police officer, and so zero feminine. Like, he is deeply threatened by his own feminine for sure. He just shuts that right down, which is AKA why he bred a daughter that tries to help men get into their feminine. um, And, but he's terrified of dance. Yeah, my dad's literally it feels like he's drowning whenever he tries to dance, and it's because, um, that's not a safe space for him. His feminine is not a safe space for him. So I'm gonna hand it over to Jeff. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I think, interesting that the dance thing made me think of something because, yeah, one of the things that has happened over the years is being able I think one of the first things is when you're disembodied is, like, you can really get, separated from even, like, understanding what you want, um, much less being able to express it, so there was a big piece of, like, just getting in touch with that. What do I want? What do I like? What do I enjoy? And then for me, just because that's that kind of energy, then there was a long period of feeling super guilty about it, of like, "Oh my god, then I just asked for this thing I want." Um,
Why
and
do you
then
feel guilty?
I mean, because I had this internal picture of that, I am a burden. Nobody really wants to take care of these needs, of desires or needs, and so I would end up for much of my life, I wouldn't even acknowledge them, and then when I started to acknowledge them, then there was a lot of shame around, "Oh, wow, I feel really, really needy, and people are gonna think that I'm a burden, and they aren't gonna wanna have me around," and all of these stories that can come up. Um, so there was just a huge journey around actually being, t where it really comes down to is learning to love myself enough that I could be like, "Oh, no, I actually there's nothing wrong with me wanting things, and there's nothing wrong with me being in my body." And it's interesting, I think, that in the Jenny Raven interview to see someone who the way they get to be, like, really okay with all of her desires is just it's a whole new persona.
Mm,
It's like
that's yeah,
is that
that's
was
really true. Yeah,
that you could just feel whether there were the
I
couple
love that.
moments when you first saw her, in her outfit or then when she was reading her own stories, as she was really feeling, like, fully legitimate in her own desires. Um, and then
That's a beautiful observation.
I think the other funny piece, just because of the dance piece came up, is that then through all of this work, then a few months ago, a friend of ours, gave us a lap dancing class. Um,
Yeah.
and and I had to get up and give Emily a lap dance, which was, um there was a moment of stark terror about it, but was one of the more fun things we've done in a long time, and to just allow myself to be in my feminine but then, in a tight container that was really safe. It was so fun and so freeing. So it was really, really cool.
I don't know why I hadn't really put together that yeah, so Brian S says, it also struck me the topic of integration and who is Jenny's alter ego and true identity. Masking is necessary from day to day, as is opening and being vulnerable to others. Yeah, like who is Jenny's alter ego and true identity? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this is what's so really powerful about cross dressing is there's always this question of and again I talk to many. In fact, I have an episode, I think episode number 3, I have another um person who is a cross-dresser coming on, and but their question really is about, am I trans? And so that's the thing about cross-dressing is that this is why like gender is such a beautiful, powerful, nuanced spectrum, and that so the idea of gender policing or the idea of uh, saying one person's in this category or not in this category is kind of absurd because like how many people who cross dress really actually their home is in that cross dressing alter ego, like their actual true home. And if they weren't a Gen Xer and if they were born 30 years earlier or later, 30 years later, that they would have had the support. They would have potentially had school systems and support, and it would just have been a much more accepted thing for them to actually transition. But because it was such a dangerous thing, they coped with a masculine identity. Like that's there's always that question of like where is the real home? And I think it just points to this is all made up. like we made up like man and women, and man wears blue and women wear, you know, pink. Like this is all a construct. And people, it is very obvious that people are not going to fit into that construct. And so the question is, you know, the question about who is the real identity is actually a really interesting one, because when if we look at internal family systems, which is the modality that I use in a lot of my kink work, which is it's idea of parts work. And it's really this idea that we have many different parts inside of us, like many. We have hundreds of parts of, and each creature, each part, each creature that we have inside of us has a different agenda. It has a different desire. It has a different, it's trying to protect us from pain in different ways. So the part of me that gets really angry is trying to protect me from pain in a different way than the part of me that gets really sad, which is trying to like, or really arrogant, which is trying to protect me from pain a different way. But that these none of the you are not your creature. You are actually the seat of consciousness. And the seat of consciousness is sort of like the feeling when you are filled with compassion and like in sort of like in a deep and like conscious meditative present state. So state of consciousness is really just like pure presence. Because we are not reactionary when we are in pure presence. And so it is really interesting to be like, well, is Jenny, is her true self masculine, or is her true self the feminine, or as a cross dresser? And that's why I think it's just like, I don't think there's a true self. I actually think what's real is the quest of continually searching for our true self. How can we continually to shed the the performances that we put on, and how can we continually heal and unburden our parts, so that when our parts are working together to create harmony and compassion and peace within our own system. Brian says, I did like when you called Jenny out for referring to things as Jenny's instead of theirs. Yeah, that's one interesting thing that happened in the podcast in the first episode was, um, because this is the first time that Jenny, the crossdresser, has ever been sort of publicly talking about her own journey. She's been public in terms of writing because she writes literotica, but that's all quite, you know, that's fantastical. This is the first time she herself has talked about her journey. And, you know, I was talking to, you know, the person in front of me, uh, you know, started off looking very much like, and she calls herself a bloke, like a man in their 50s. And then she transformed, but um right, that transition into like who is Jenny into Jenny was exactly what the whole thing was about. And then I did a little coaching with her to try to see if she could actually drop into Jenny while being seen, while talking and answering questions about herself. And it was really challenging for her. And again, that's because it's the first part of her journey. So it's really beautiful, but that's also what I do with clients. And to be honest, it's sort of what I did with him when we first started dating. I don't recommend that you date somebody and sort of be their coach at the same time, but it is sort of what happens to us. Um, but it's I help people drop into their bodies to find to listen to what is already there. And I think that's what's really important to know is that we already have all of the answers we need in our bodies. All we have to do is quiet ourselves so that we can listen to the wisdom that is already there. Yeah.
And I think the other big piece of that is that you were doing for her was like, and be in that thing, be fully out in the thing that you're like super ashamed of, that you have all this shame around, and be seen in that, and then discover that, oh, it's actually not that bad. This, it's like, oh wow, this person is actually really excited and really loving that I am out and doing this thing, rather than all the stories that we can build up in our heads that like, oh, if I ever show this part of myself, I'll be despised or abandoned or shunned, or any other number of existential terrors. So
Yeah, I really loved it when in the episode Jenny talks about when she was like, I had this whole feeling of shame my entire life that I couldn't come out. But then now that I have, the things that I was afraid of are actually not there. And she talks about how maybe shame doesn't actually really exist. It's just like this phantom that we think is there, but when we actually step out, it just disappears. And I thought that was such a um, beautiful insight because that is one of the things that um, I actually made a TikTok video about this and it's going to come out soon, but that is one of the things that I really believe, which is that we are all human. We all have shame and we all feel like we are somehow bad or broken or special in some way or another because we are too broken, and if other people only knew how broken or how whatever we are, we would be disowned because that's what shame does. It is an evolutionary signal to conform in order to for survival, in order to stay with the pact, and then of keeping us. We are social pact tribe animals. That's why shame is so powerful to shrink us, right? To just don't step out of the line, because if you step out of line, you're gonna get eaten by a tiger. But the problem is that we do no longer have the same types uh of threats that obviously we used to when the evolution this evolved within us, and so it is an overdeveloped sense, and so therefore it is often just a phantom. Because here's the thing is that when we have shame, there could be it is pro- it, they could be real signals that there is danger here. If you tell people in your small Alabama town that you are gay, there are very real consequences that you could get fired, that you could be harassed, that you could be beaten, like whatever the fuck. And so that shame, like, is trying to keep you safe. It is actually a dangerous area, or you could be disowned by your family. But these signals can be addressed and owned and still letting the shame go, because navigating the actual obstacles is 1 million times harder when there's stories of shame, because shame is I am bad. Shame is I am bad, whereas versus guilt is I've done something bad. Um Shame just like shuts us down. It is a black curtain veil in front of everything, and it distorts everything. And so you can't actually see what is real, what is a real threat, what is not a real threat. It's an overdeveloped sense. And so it takes a lot of work in every single human to be able to address that and have the compassion with ourselves to to dance with shame in a way that we can change our relationship to it. Yeah, yeah, Brian, as you are well read. Brene Brown for the win. Correct. Yeah, her book Brene Brown is one of my background is in abortion care. So if you can't tell, like my like shame is something that I've been like the intersection of shame and and bodies has been like moth to a flame. I've been like a little parasite eating and discovering it and eating it for my entire adult life. Um, but yeah, so Brene Brown has a really beautiful book about shame, and it was hugely supportive to me because I was a counselor at an abortion clinic for quite a long time, or for a couple years, really. Um, what's your journey with shame?
Well, we talked a little bit about it, but, yeah, I think, the primary ones that weighed down were around, kink and sexuality and being, like, really willing to, um, own that I wanted things, and so, my fantasies were different, but it's not too different. The start of my journey was in writing erotic fiction on the internet, and or smut really, and just like
It
beat up.
was.
Yeah, that was like the first place.
I have never read
Which is a good thing.
your
You
smut.
you wouldn't be
What
happy.
the fuck? Why not? Why wouldn't I be
It
happy?
was a long time ago. Thing it was underdeveloped, but it was interesting. It was a way to like express these things in a way that felt safe, as an anonymous person on the internet, and then
Mm.
get more and more develop. Having that become more and more developed. And yeah, I think once we really started digging into things to just sort of discover that like, oh, I can express these out loud and be seen and still loved and still held and not be like
Yeah.
shamed or shunned is it's a huge um yeah, it was just a hugely liberating experience to discover that I didn't have to carry that. I think, the next step after that was for me to actually learn to own it on my own. But um to have people see it and maybe force me to dive into the dirtiest, hardest parts of it, and then still hold me at the end of that. Were those were the first steps to realize, like, oh, there is actually a pathway here. You don't have to hide this. And even to this day, there's things that I'll have this instinct that I have to hide. Um, like if I order takeout that Emily can't eat, or any number of things that like, oh, I suddenly feel this compulsion to hide what I'm doing, and I go, wait, I don't have to do that anymore. I can just have my things that I want, and I don't have to be embarrassed by it.
It's hilarious when I catch him doing something like this because we have a very, like, shame-free relationship. I mean, like, this we use conscious kink to, like, clear out anything that builds up often. But when sometimes I notice him, like, kind of sneaking something, and I was like, "What is like," like, and then it's like his old patterns, which is hilarious. I love when I catch him doing it. Um, Brian says, a partner I've noticed and have been concerned about is,
That might
ho
be pattern.
oh, pattern is
You may have
how
meant pattern. I don't know.
how often Kinksters' first marriages don't last a lifetime, but the next long-term relationship can be more fulfilling. Well,
No.
Jeff, you have a lot of experience with that.
Yeah, I think the thing that is difficult is yeah, if you're in a long-term relationship where you've been hiding a significant part of yourself,
Yeah.
um, that that it can be very challenging to for the other partner to have that come out. And I mean that I've seen it both in kink issues and also in people like who are polyamorous and like want to open up a relationship is it rarely works has been my experience. Just what I've observed is that you're kind of changing the terms of the deal, and it can be hard. I mean, I'm a big fan of it. I think, it was the that's not actually the reason my marriage ended, but once it did, it was like, okay, I definitely want to address this one part of me. Um but yeah, I think it would have been um yeah, that it was much easier to come into this new relationship, say, okay, this is actually a really important part of what I want to explore and what I want to grow into, and not hide it. Um, because again, as trying to come out and explain things that you've been hiding for decades it's difficult and it can be really hurtful.
I have a lot of my clients I support doing this. Like the of coming out to their partners and like, "Hey, by the way, I've actually been fantasizing about being submissive for 15 years and now we haven't had sex for because we've never talked about it and I've never really just like been intentional about our sexual relationship. Now we haven't had sex in like 6 years and I'm going to need to change that cuz I'm dying slowly inside and I don't want to do that anymore." And it's really challenging. It's really challenging. It's a lot to work through, especially because again, a lot of my clients have actually acted on it and seen like dominatrixes on the side and, in order to get their needs met, but it's caused a lot of dishonesty, and oftentimes it's actually not the fact that they went and saw a dominatrix, but it's actually the lying that is the ultimate betrayal. Um, Brian says, "I don't know if the pattern is valid or just an observation error." No, I mean, again, like I see it a lot in my clients as well. A lot. Um, yeah, which is why I always advocate. I mean, I'm just such a huge advocate for um getting into it for number one, starting to reorient yourself towards the love, like getting off on personal development, getting off on your own journey. Ooh, look what I found. Like, ooh, that I feel really nervous right now. What's going on? Ooh, how fun. Like really, and this is the thing that I haven't, I just sort of naturally have, which is like this deep, profound, like bloodthirsty curiosity for my own inner experience. And it's because I'm in human design and I'm an emotional manifester. So I have giant emotional waves. And the only way that I could figure out how to surf those waves is to get curious and to figure out what the fuck is going on. Cause they were just like tsunamis, like, and I just couldn't, there was really challenging. And so I just got very good at like, ooh, like I just figured this out. How does this work? Blah, blah, blah. And my previous relationship, I was partnered with somebody who was very repressed. And it was with a woman, and she felt really burdened by my constant, like, what's going on with you? How does that feel? Like, let's explore it. Let's process it. Let's play with it. Like, what's going on? And at the end, like, it was too much for her. Well, so after her, I was like, whatever my next relationship is, they have to love the process of the project of the relationship. That the relationship, the energy between us, because like as attachment folks will say, we have the me space, the they space, and the we space. So the energy between us, the relationship itself is its own creature. And just like a child that needs to be tended to, it needs to be raised, it needs to be supported and loved, it needs to be, and most couples don't do that. And so figuring out like it's like raising a child and like, oh, like going to class and loving going to classes about how to best raise your child, or like reading books on how to best raise your child. And so like I knew that I needed a partner that loved the process of exploring the dynamic between us. And so, I found him, and he did not know what he was getting in for. Like, it was a total bait and switch. He did not know what he was getting into, but he discovered the, like, real love of it, and now we go to retreats all the time, we're reading books together, we have weekly practices, our relationship is truly centered on, like, thriving and blossoming in the we space, and that's something we had to cultivate over years. Again, by learning with all of these amazing teachers. If you go to my soulkink.com/resources, my resource page, you'll see I list videos from a lot of the teachers and a lot of the retreats we've been to, which I just cannot recommend enough. Um, yeah, what do you have to say about that? What was it like going from, and actually, Brian, it feels like basically we're just having a conversation with you once again. Um, I'm curious what your experience is, in your relationship, because I know you talked a little bit about, um, the it sounds like your wife is an LCSW, but, you've talked a little bit about how staying connected as you travel, as you're in the military, and I'm curious, like, do you have a relationship where you both are dedicated to the project of the relationship, the discovery process? I'm curious because especially as an LCSW, like she's devoted her life to supporting people in their own discovery process. So I'm curious if that's in your own relationship. So as Brian is going to answer, or if Brian, if you get the chance to answer, I'll pass the mic over to Jeff and talk about his experience.
Yeah, I think the one other piece that sort of came up for me when you were talking about all that is that I think the important values between the two of us is that we say frequently to each other is like all of you is welcome here. And sometimes it can be pretty ugly parts that will come out that the anxious, ones that are worried, or the angry, or the arrogance, or um, the parts that want to go and hide. And it's, the reason it comes up is I think too about when you're saying, Brian, when you're talking about like first relationships, maybe first marriages don't last, and the second ones maybe are a little bit more fulfilling. Is that at least in my one experience so far about in this is that coming into the second relationship was much more committed to being fully honest with everything that comes up in me. Yeah, I see Brian use the Justin London's Alpha and Omega kind of piece, and so that means, I mean, one of the mistakes that I made, and I know can happen to a lot of people, is I felt like, oh, the bulk of this work is for me to really be in my alpha all the time. And actually, the big learning is like, oh, finding ways that I can be fully in my omega in a way that's contained in hell, but where I can be in my sadness or my despair or my self shame and self loathing, or any of these. And sometimes that means I take it to my men's group, but a lot of times I just bring it to Emily, and this is my full mess. And I think for Emily, as long as it isn't like, oh, this isn't going to be all the time. I don't have to hold this forever, but for both of us to have that time where the other one can go and be in their full mess and be held by their partner, is it's built so much trust and love between us. Sometimes it doesn't really generate a lot of polarity. Sometimes it's ends up with us both, kind of being weepy in a corner, but it just has really been the foundation of building love and trust for us.
Yeah. So Brian, you're saying that you're in survival mode with busy with kids and extracurriculars, and that you're in alpha at work and alpha with the kids, and just exhausted when my wife and I can come home back together. Yeah, I'm curious what I remember that um I'm curious you really because you really made when you were married. I don't have the
My kids
experience
are
of
little.
raising kids, right? But Jeff does. But when Jeff was married, I felt like you really took a stand for your relationship while you were married.
Yeah, I think, and obviously everybody's got their own resources and limitations and so on, but I just, all the new parents that we have a number of friends who have small children now, and it's always my thing is you just got to find a way to get date night, to get out, to do something where it's just the two of you, and hold that relationship. Because when by the time they're teenagers, if all you've been doing
Yeah.
is doing that project of raising kids, um it can, when they're 16, and they hate you, or whatever, that when they're on their own journey of leaving you, then you come back to your partner and your spouse, and if you haven't been tending that, I think it can be really rough. So yeah, I get that that's super hard, though. It's easy for me to say. It was, finding babysitters, finding nights out. I remember a lot of times we were
Yes,
both,
and why is it easy for you to say?
well, just because everybody has their own resources. At the time, we had, we had more than enough. We had enough money that having a babysitter was a thing we could do every week, and go do a nice dinner or something like that. And not everybody can do that, but you can find something. Is my position, and a lot of times it was just exhaustion. I can remember my wife at the time. She'd be like, "I don't want to do it. I'm too tired. I just let's just." And I was like, "No, we're going." It was one of the few times I would step into my alpha and say, "No, I've planned this thing. We've got a babysitter, and we're gonna go out." And then of course we get out and we just talk about the kids, but at least it was just the two of us, um, and helped maintain that.
This is actually why I find Justin Patrick Pierce and London Angel Winters so inspiring because they've been together for 14 years and she's in her 40?
She's in her 50s.
She's in her 50s, and he's, like, 10 years younger than her, and they have a 5-year-old. They have a 5-year-old, and they every single morning, they do a 2-hour practice. They wake up at 5 AM. The alarm doesn't matter how much they sleep, they wake up at 5 AM. She goes off into her room for a feminine practice for 1 hour. He goes off to his room for a masculine practice for 1 hour. And then after 1 hour, they come and do a joint practice every single morning. Rain or shine, sickness, health, whatever the fuck. Like because their relationship is part of their spiritual practice. It's part of it's like taking a shower. Like it is part of the reason they are on this earth. And you see that in their work and they bring their exhaustion into that. That's one thing we really learn from them is like we don't it doesn't matter how you show up, you just show up. You bring your exhaustion into the play. You bring your frustration into the play. You bring your
Self-doubts.
self-doubts and hatred and rage into the play, but you bring it into so that the field of your relationship can hold it and move it and always you'll come back into deep profound gratitude for each other. Brian says, I've mustered enough alpha to force us to follow the Gottman's recommendations, 2 hours a weekend date, 1 hour week review. That's
Nice, that's
awesome.
fantastic. That's really good.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's a start. I'm curious how long you've been doing that. Um,
And I'll say, because we in some of our close friends, we actually met at one of Justin and London's workshops, and we have a running joke between us because we both really got really inspired. Like, we're gonna do this every day, just like Justin London. And I mean, we're very Emily and I are very proud of ourselves that we actually can hold this. We do it every week, rain or shine, is like once a week. I can't imagine doing once a day. That is, it's like that commitment is I'm sure it bears fruit for them, but it was the couple times we tried is just very hard to sustain. So the point is, celebrate what you're doing. It's like 2 hours in a week review, hour, 1 hour review a week that's amazing. That's really, really good practice.
yeah. That's really good. And also I would say so in our practices can be very tantric focused, just in terms of breathing and moving and sensual aspects of polarity, or they can be very kinky. And so we bring in kink. So that's when we really practice our conscious kink also, is we really bring in kink of power dynamics and allowing who's gonna be the dom um the and flogging and impact play, and we try to bring in a lot of kink into that world as well. I think so does Jess in London, but I think theirs is very tantric focused. Um, and I will say it took quite a few tries to figure out what was our best day of the week, how much time, morning or evening, and until we got it to something that's been sustainable. And now we've been doing this practice that we do now, which is every Thursday morning for like 2 hours. We do it. We've been doing it. I don't know how long.
4 or 5 months now. Yeah.
That's it.
I'd have to go
We've
back and
been
look.
doing it for a
It's
while.
most of this year.
Yeah.
Sometime this spring we started.
Brian says it's been going on for 2 months now, and we resettled post move. Now that they've resettled, that's awesome. That's such a good practice. Now, the thing that I would really suggest is start doing practices where you don't use words. So start doing practices where you're just breathing together. Um, couples practices that you could look up is from John Wineland or from Justin Patrick Pearson Angel and Winters, but where it's almost like a guided meditation kind of a thing. It's like a guided couples practice. Both Justin Patrick, if you look up Justin Patrick Pearson and Winters, I'm sure they have some on there. Or you could also read their book, Playing with Fire. It has a lot of really great partner practices. But doing practices where you don't use words, especially because Brian, I know that you two, your your sticking point is that you both are in the alpha a lot. So, what is it like when you don't ask her to be in her alpha? and you ask her to be in her alpha when you ask her to use words. Um, and so yeah,
Or another one
don't
then is
use
like
words.
going or yeah, a primal play.
Yeah.
Just get a we have a sheepskin rug on the floor and get on that and just, crawl around each other and wrestle and then just see again, one of the things that we've definitely are playing with right now is it's not necessarily guaranteed when we're going who's that there's going to be a structured dynamic, power dynamic. It may come out of what we do. It may be I'll go and Emily will be sitting above me and then she's like, I don't like that. And then she lays down, bows down underneath or whatever. There's but rather than talk about it, we just be in our bodies and play with that movement and then also just try to be really attuned to the other one.
This is
Because sometimes talking, I mean, I think that the point of it is sometimes doing so much talking is like you can miss the whole point of like there's a lot of brain waves going back and forth, but you're not actually connecting with your heart.
yeah, a big fan of not talking. Um, like it it's actually the same thing that you saw in Jenny Raven, right? When she talked, she shoots up to her head, shoots up to her masculine. Whereas other things is like what if you take a dance class together? Um, taking a dance class together, taking is actually a really good first step for finding polarity because one of you is leading and one of you is following and you're listening to each other's bodies. And so again, all things are practice. All things are going to start off being consciously incompetent. Consciously incompetent is such a frustrating fucking phase, but it's also the phase where so much can change. Because eventually you're going to get to consciously competent, which is like, I know what I'm doing and I'm doing it. Whereas consciously incompetent is I know what I'm doing and I'm
I
fucking
suck at
failing at it.
it.
Right. But a dance class is like a really great idea because you're also starting to learn each other's bodies. How do you work without words when you're in polarity? Is also a really great thing.
And the
We
and the, the lap dancing, giving each other lap dances. That was I got to recommend that one too.
Lap dancing, pole dancing, like so good, so good. So we are probably going to close up a little early today. If there's any last questions, Brian, we haven't answered them. Otherwise, we are going to say goodbye. And eventually, I will start promoting this, and I will not be such a lazy fucking asshole. And start promoting it so we get more folks on this. Because that is
But
the goal is to help more people. But also, Brian, very loving. Thank you so much for all of your consistency and your curiosity and following this journey of Soul Kink and exploring more. If there's also, Brian, feel free to reach out if there are any questions or any way that I can support you. Also, or if you have any ideas of how to share this more or what you would want, what content you would want to see, that would all be really helpful. You can reach me at hello@soulkink.com. Would love to. Um, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that support, Brian. I appreciate it. Yeah, but since you are so dedicated, I would love to hear your thoughts on like what you think might be like get people in the door or content or whatever. That'd be great. All right, that's going to be it for us today. Thanks so much for joining us. And again, check out Soul King Therapy, the podcast, on everywhere you get podcasts, Spotify. Leave a review. That would be so helpful. And then also check in next week at 4 p.m. for the next Soul King Therapy. And I will work on promoting it this week. My God. Okay. Bye bye.